If you have a true crime, what is that? True crime. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Crue Trime. Crue Trime, Crue Trime, Crue Trime, Crue Trime, Crue Trime. My name is Sarah, and what I do here is tell you a terrible story to ruin your day. And put on my makeup at the same time. So if that sounds like fun to you, you are in the right place. So make sure that you subscribe to this channel and turn on the little notifications so that you never miss one of my terrible stories. As you can tell, I'm in my new space. If it sounds weird in here, echoey, I'm working on it, okay? I also had to turn the fan off. It's probably gonna get a little hot in here. Side note, if you care, I will do a tour of the new place, but I kind of decided that I'm just gonna wait until it's a little bit more presentable because it's empty. We had to get rid of so much stuff when we moved to Brooklyn that now we're replacing. Let me get a few things first and then I'll show you around. And I cannot wait to decorate for Halloween. Okay, so today's terrible story was recommended by a lovely viewer named Caitlin. Hi, Caitlin! Thank you, friend. I appreciate you. This story is pretty twisty-turny, and it's kind of a 2-for-1, so hold on to your butts. This is the story of Kevin Roby. Okay, all right, hang on a second. I am going to die if I don't have the air on. So hang on. It's too hot. It's too hot. Okay. So if you're hearing the hum of the air conditioner, it's summertime. Get over it. Also, I don't talk about or feature the makeup that I'm using as I'm using it. So if you are interested to know what it is that I'm using today, look down in the description box because everything is linked just for you. On January 31st, 1987, officers from the Los Angeles Police Department visited a home on West 37th Street to investigate a missing persons report. 25-year-old Veralin Hill had been reported missing by her family. Vermalin's brother, 23-year-old Air Force Academy dropout Kevin Roby, told the investigators that he eyewitnessed 3 men dressed as Japanese ninja warriors kidnap his sister. With that information, the investigators came to the house and asked Kevin to walk them through the crime scene. So as they walked through the house, Kevin was being weird, cagey. He was the only eyewitness, but he couldn't describe anything other than, Japanese ninja warriors.
Don't go ninja, nobody don't need ninja.
Essentially carried his sister out of the house. Where did they go? Did they say anything? I don't know. So the point is the police were already squinting. So they're walking around the house and then the officers found a body inside a large trash can that had been covered up with dog food. The body was Veralin. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death. And Kevin's baloney ninja story was busted. So he was arrested and charged with her assault and murder.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
So I'm really kind of fast forwarding through the facts. Essentially, it was open and shut. Indisputable evidence, Kevin was guilty. Kevin's case went to a bench trial, which means that there's no jury, just the judge. He was very quickly found guilty on all charges, and in fact, he received an additional sexual assault charge, R-word, when it was discovered that Kevin had also assaulted another one of his sisters. So, real quality guy. During the sentencing phase, the defense presented mitigating factors to the court, basically explaining how bad Kevin's life had been up to that point. Actually, not a whole lot of information is available, but Kevin was one of 9 children that was raised in extreme poverty and abuse. His father was an alcoholic and left the family when he was very young. Kevin's mother reportedly suffered from some pretty severe mental illness. So the kids were very often left alone to fend for themselves. No food, they were dirty, they were just at risk. Kevin and his other siblings told the court that they had also been physically and sexually assaulted by some of their older brothers and cousins. So just, bad. bad all around. So with that in mind, Kevin dodged the death penalty, which was at that time still in effect in California. Instead, Kevin was sent to prison for life without the possibility of parole. A few years into his sentence, Kevin was remitted to the brand spanking new Supermax prison that was built in Crescent City, California, called Pelican Bay. Pelican Bay would go on to house the absolute worst of the worst, most violent offenders in the entire California prison system. The end. Just kidding. Okay, it's just getting started. Okay, so once Kevin got settled in at Pelican Bay, he found religion, Satanism. Well, let me just back it up just a second. The reports about Kevin Roby say that he found Satanism, but in a phone interview, Kevin explained that his beliefs and thought process regarding why he had killed his sister, Veralin. Kevin claims that he had been psychiatrically evaluated and diagnosed with schizophrenia and schizoaffective features with delusions of grandeur, but he was not mentally ill. Kevin said in that interview that his childhood was amazing. He said he was good at whatever he did and was sure to succeed. But he was so good at everything that he ever did that he flunked out of the Air Force Academy. In fact, he was so good at everything that no one expected him to ever do what he did to his sisters. Kevin said that when he was young, just a small child, demons started communicating with him. They told him that he was the chosen one, that he was meant to complete certain tasks that would bring about a balance on the earth. Not mentally ill. Okay. Kevin explained that the murder of his sister was a sacrifice to the demons to seal a pact that they had made. He had to commit an act so vile that there was no coming back from it. Also, when you sacrifice a human life, it won't really work unless you truly love the person. Killing a person you love is what makes it a true and real sacrifice. And the reason that he had to rape Veralin was to release the sexual energy required to open a portal to communicate with the demons. Not mentally ill. Not mentally ill. Okay, so the formally diagnosed schizophrenic Kevin Roby was serving life in prison for a very violent crime that he committed in order to fulfill a demonic sacrifice. But he was not mentally ill, and he only found Satanism once he got into prison?
That makes no fucking sense!
I'm confused too. Anyway, so at Pelican Bay, Kevin started calling himself a Satanic Christ. Who? He wasn't saying that he was Satan, but he had been prophesized to bring balance as the Alpha and the Omega. This is really fun. Basically, he needed to battle God because there was too much light and not enough darkness. Also, people were breeding indiscriminately and it was throwing the world out of whack. You know, Kevin wanted population control. For people to like have their wedding tackle somehow like iced out, you know, put on hold your abilities to breed. Just until the person could show that they were knowledgeable and balanced enough to reproduce. The demons told him this. You know how like when you're listening to something real crazy and then it kind of starts to make sense a little bit? Anyway, in this phone interview from jail, Kevin was saying that he argued with these psychiatric evaluators because they were trying to diagnose him with mental illness, but he said that these ideas and things that he was talking about were part of his religion, not a delusion. If you think about it, anybody else, take your pick, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, there's a lot of religions. Those people have very sincerely held religious beliefs that are based on texts that detail other people long ago hearing and seeing things, hearing the voice of God, hallucinating. And if those people were evaluated by modern day scientists, they'd be diagnosed with mental illness too. I mean, exactly, but okay. Anyways, Kevin's evaluation is part of his medical record, so obviously I have no way of verifying if any of it is true. This is what Kevin said himself. And he claims that these evaluators rescinded the diagnosis, and they just said that everything that he did was just based on his religion. that he's not ill. So while housed at Pelican Bay for many years, Kevin was single-celled, meaning that he was listed on some kind of administrative level about getting his own cell with no cellmate or only another Satanist. He was that, militant about it. He would actually later file a lawsuit over this, administrative labeling of him as single cell, and how the corrections officers and the captain, the president, whatever, at Pelican Bay messed up his paperwork on purpose to fuck with him, I guess. He pointed out that he was at Pelican Bay single-celled for almost 17 years. No roommate. Cellmate. Then all of a sudden things changed, and then things changed. In 2005, Kevin, Satanic Christ, got a cellmate. 36-year-old Lloyd Avery II, also known as Baby Jesus, because he was an evangelical Christian who was heavily focused on bringing the word of God to every prisoner. The prison put Baby Jesus with Satanic Christ.
Hey, girl!
So how do you think that went? Well, let's learn a little more about little baby Jesus, shalln't we? Lloyd Fernandez Avery II was born on June 21st, 1969 in Los Angeles, California, to Linda and Lloyd Avery Sr. Lloyd Sr. was a self-employed service technician, and Linda initially was a stay-at-home mom, but then later worked at a bank. The Avery family lived in View Park, a suburb of Los Angeles, and Lloyd actually went to Beverly Hills High School. He played baseball and water polo, and he was friends with the children of, very influential rich people in LA. One of his best friends growing up was Quincy Jones III, aka QD3. Lloyd and his siblings didn't want for anything. They were doing just fine. Lloyd briefly attended Los Angeles Technical Trade School while he studied music. He had intentions to pursue a career in music and acting. Lloyd actually became friendly with a young USC film student named John Singleton. John would later go on to write and direct the iconic 1991 film Boys in the Hood. And John cast his friend Lloyd in a role in the film. It was a very small part, although one that's actually very super important to the plot. Lloyd is the guy who plays the gang member who shoots Ricky in the drive-by. Spoiler alert. The movie's over 30 years old. Get with the program. Anyway, it wasn't like a speaking role, but Lloyd's performance was so well received. He was very intense. He landed roles in other movies like Poetic Justice and Don't Be a Menace in South Central while drinking your juice in the hood.
What you say about my mama? Huh?
You guys remember that movie? I saw it in the theater, okay? Because I'm an old. Anyway, so these roles that Lloyd landed were all pretty minor, but they were all kind of the same character, like a gang member thug. I think actually one of the credits is called Knucklehead #1 or Thug #2. You get it. Well, Lloyd was very much into it, and life started imitating art. He got himself mixed up with the real life Bloods in Los Angeles. He was hanging out in the jungles, aka Baldwin Village. It's a Bloods territory neighborhood in Los Angeles. He was just, assimilating, I guess. Was this method acting, or he just fell in love with the culture? Is that stupid to say? Anyways, he wasn't just pretending to be a gang member. He was really in it. He started to sell drugs to, I guess, supplement his income. The only real money he was making was these very small kind of residual checks from his acting gigs. And by the late 90s, he even had a tattoo over his eyebrow that said Jungles with a Z. Lloyd, although his performance was praised, his behavior on set was not so nice. He was known to actually get into fights with other cast members or crew on the set. There was one occasion reported where he was smoking weed laced with PCP on set. He was intense and violent, and he couldn't seem to separate being Lloyd or playing a part in the movie. So, cut to July 1st, 1999, and Lloyd Avery had burned every acting bridge he'd ever made. It's kind of unclear to me whether or not he actually knew these people or if this was just like an altercation with random people, but he got into an argument with Annette Lewis and Percy Branch at the Santa Barbara Plaza. Witnesses reported hearing, raised voices, and then Lloyd pulled out a .45 caliber gun and shot both of them. Annette tried to run, but Lloyd shot her 5 times in the back. She died shortly after. And when the police arrived, Percy was still alive. He'd been shot in the stomach and was in critical condition, so he was taken to UCLA Medical Center. But unfortunately, he wasn't able to tell investigators much about what happened before he died. The investigation was pretty cut and dry. It later revealed evidence that directly linked Lloyd to the shooting, spent bullet casings, but there was absolutely no motive. So for a long time, this case kind of went unsolved. Well, after that murder, Lloyd actually did find some acting work in 2 productions, but at the same time, he was busy racking up more criminal charges. Making terrorist threats, assault with a deadly weapon, grand theft auto. Lloyd was very proud of his activities. He bragged about how hard he was, like how deep into the gang activity he was. Anyway, on July 20th, 1999, a former roommate of Lloyd's went to the LAPD and snitched. The roommate said that Lloyd had a nickname with the Bloods. They called him LA Deuce because he had killed 2 people. On December 8th, 1999, Lloyd was arrested at his grandma's house. And that blush is a little crazy. Okay, so how did gang member Lloyd Avery turn into little baby Jesus? When he was in prison awaiting trial, he found God. Now, whether or not it was actually sincere is for somebody else to decide, but as quickly as Lloyd adapted to his gang member role and lifestyle, he turned completely around and was a full blast, born again, evangelical Christian and started calling himself Baby Jesus. He also aggressively proselytized to other inmates to, turn their lives over to God. So once Lloyd's case finally made it to trial, he actually took the stand in his own defense and he said he had an alibi. That he was somewhere else in Hollywood on the night of the murders. But there was no evidence to back that up. So on December 11th, 2000, Lloyd was convicted of the murders of Annette and Percy. And he was sentenced to life without parole plus 13 years, and he was sent to Pelican Bay. So Lloyd arrived at Pelican Bay in March of 2000, and he wrote letters to a friend about his new cellmate, Kevin. Lloyd was dead set on converting this lost soul to Christianity, and he said that God put him in place for a reason. So Kevin only ever wanted to talk about his demonic motivations and the voices he was hearing. But this evangelical born-again Lloyd would spend hours trying to convince Kevin that he was a lost soul on the wrong path and that he needed to repent. I mean, it was going nowhere, okay? These guys were each equally invested in their own beliefs and neither one of them would back down. And very notably, this section of the prison that they were housed in, because of the super violent, dangerous nature of the crimes that they had committed, there wasn't a lot of out of the cell time. There were no stand on the line in-person counting of inmates. Meals were actually brought to their cells. They were only ever allowed out to shower like every other day at best. And, it was intense. And that's a lot of time to just be sitting there talking. So on September 4th, 2005, Kevin and Lloyd got into an argument about religion. Imagine that. It wasn't the first time, but it would be the last. This time, the argument actually became physically violent. It ended with Kevin beating and choking Lloyd until he was unconscious. In this altercation, Lloyd actually suffered some pretty serious internal bleeding, and his lungs filled up with blood, which caused him to die. Kevin took Lloyd's body and put it on his bunk and covered it with blankets. Then he pretended he was still alive. Each time the corrections officer would come around to like make sure they were alive and in their cells, he tied a string to his arm and, like would move it like he was waving when the CO would walk by. He was pulling like a weekend at Bernie's with Lloyd. This went on for 2.5 days. 2.5 days, Kevin sat in that cell with a dead body. He ate the tray of food that would come for Lloyd. He even wrote a letter from Lloyd to, one of his pen pals. It was toward the end of the second day that Kevin decided that he was going to perform a satanic ritual, to challenge God. So Kevin said that a lot of blood gushed out of Lloyd, probably from his lungs. So he used that to paint a pentagram on the floor and walls. Kevin would later say that the point of that was to keep Lloyd's spirit there until the ritual was complete. He explained that in that same prophecy, it said that the Satanic Christ, aka him, would take on the champion of the forces of light, which he said was Lloyd because he had become so prolific at pushing Christianity. So Satanic Christ would take on little baby Jesus to let God know, you're next. Okay, whatever you say. Even though these corrections officers apparently didn't notice that one of the prisoners in one of the most high-profile parts of the prison had been dead for 2 days, they definitely noticed Kevin performing this ritual, whatever he was doing when they walked by to do the next inmate count. They entered the cell, they arrested Kevin, they took Lloyd to the infirmary and tried to revive him, but it was useless, having been dead for 2 days. Lloyd's death was reported as an aspiration of blood, with blunt force trauma being a contributing factor. The medical examiner speculated that the head injury that he had sustained might have been caused by Lloyd's skull being slammed against the stainless steel sink in the cell. Kevin totally confessed to everything that he did, but he was not charged with murder.
What?
Even though the district attorney and the state's attorney general weighed in on the matter, because he was already serving life without the possibility of parole, didn't think it was worth it, which was very, very upsetting to Lloyd's family. 5 officers were later found guilty of misconduct and received some relatively minor disciplinary action, considering their negligence resulted in someone's death. Kevin Roby has been moved around the prison system many times over the years, and the Bloods gang is very well embedded in the California prison system. So it made Kevin very vulnerable. So he is currently housed at the California Correctional Institute in Chino in the Protective Unit. It's a special wing that's really designed for people who have left gang life, and Kevin is not a former gang member, but having murdered one puts him at tremendous risk. In 2012, in a absolutely absurd lawsuit, Kevin filed a civil rights claim against some of the corrections officers and a captain at Pelican Bay. I was mentioning this before, essentially saying that they were responsible for Lloyd's death since he wasn't supposed to have a cellmate. Get the fuck out of here. In 2020, Kevin Roby announced plans to publish a book about his satanic exploits while in prison, but it has not yet found a publisher. So, TBD. And that is the story of Kevin Roby. That was something. Again, if you want to know what makeup I used in today's look, then just look down below in the description box. Everything is linked. If there is something that I use that's no longer available, I will find you something very similar. If you have a Crue Trime story that you want to recommend to me, also down in the description box is the link to a Google document where you can fill in all the dirty details. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for hanging out today and for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this one, then consider subscribing to this channel before you leave today. I upload new videos on YouTube every week, and you can follow me on all of the other socials as well. That is it for now. I will catch you next time in the next video. Bye! This is not what I meant to do. Shit. Stainless steel sink in the cell. Okay. This tape is not gonna be sticky enough. This shirt was a terrible choice. I'm sweating. I don't know how long I've been talking to the camera without it being recording. Can't tell, is that high? What the fuck? I need my mirror. Come here, mirror.